Here we are once again. Greetings, everyone. Today, somehow, was a little bit discombobulated getting ready for this, so bear with me. In any case, it's another Friday in the era of COVID-19, and, well, the world has just passed 11 million cases, and in the United States, just yesterday, there were more than 50,000 in one day, and it seems like this will escalate. It's very possible that we'll have a daily total in the United States of around 100,000 in the near future. So, despite the fact that everybody had hoped that by the summer this would all disappear, on the contrary, it hasn't. So, even though the world is opening up, and different places are opening in different ways, and some places, of course, are closing again, we still have to be vigilant, and this time of social distancing is by far not over, unfortunately. I've been reading and sort of going over books which I had read earlier, which about the era of the beginning of the 20th century, since we've been discussing both jazz, the beginnings of jazz and ragtime, and Stravinsky himself. And one thing that really has struck me, once again, I have to say, because it did already from a long time ago, was how earth-shattering decisions that affect millions, billions of people are made by just a handful. And that is something which I hope that the world can get over, because it's been incredibly detrimental and devastating in many circumstances. What I was just reading about was the follow-up to the First World War. Of course, this is the time that we are talking about when Stravinsky wrote Histoire d'un Soldat, and the end of it, of course, was when he wrote the three pieces. And how really the whole build-up, everything that involved no more than really 6 people. And to think that the whole world sort of followed that into the abyss is really remarkable. I'm not going to talk more about it. Maybe another time I will sort of rant a little more and give you actual examples. But this is just some thought that keeps coming into my mind. Okay, I think enough of this, because I always do sort of speak, sort of ramble on for a long time, and then don't have time to do what I actually set out to do. So we turn immediately now to the Stravinsky three pieces and to Stravinsky in general, and the topic of where does innovation come from? And of course we are dealing with innovation in music now, in art, and how does something new come about, and what is the relationship between this new business, this new structure, let's say, this new idea, and what was before. Okay, and this has to do, I think, so much with what I would say very simply is an open mind. in the case of Stravinsky, we really have this. So Stravinsky was not interested in theory, in creating an edifice like of theoretical understanding, like what Schoenberg was and Hindemith was, for instance, at that time. Other people were as well. He was interested simply in being interested. That's and Elliott Carter, I keep referring to him because not only my personal connection, but because he was just such a font of inspiration himself, and because he knew Stravinsky so well, I'd say that he spoke about this early period of Stravinsky, especially, where he said that, Stravinsky would on purpose write wrong notes. And that makes it very difficult, in a certain sense, to correct his music, because there are many instances where, in fact, the note that's wrong is right. You see. So it's not simply, and I go to the piano now, okay. It's not simply, for instance, that he would take, it's in the Rite of Spring, and then pair it with E major, and get that, and say, that's kind of interesting, I sort of like that. But he would also do other things. Like, for instance, we can take something very, very simple, and then go, okay, this is very nice, very normal, and of course, it's incredibly easy to compose prosaic, uninteresting music. But let's say, instead of that, we go instead, interesting. Or, that already becomes more interesting. And then let's say, something like that, and then we say, oh, that's fascinating. And I think that this is what Stravinsky was doing himself. Of course, even in a much more sophisticated way, I do this in something very, very, very elementary way. But just the idea of pairing things and thinking, this is interesting. Oh, this is interesting. And he took material from many places. We were talking about ragtime, we were talking about jazz. He took folk music, and as Taruskin showed, and he made a big point of it, this is Richard Taruskin, he's not my friend, but in any case, it's an interesting, important person, and important Stravinsky scholar, even if he's not my friend. I know, I stick my foot in my mouth many times. But Stravinsky always said that he did not, and I mentioned this earlier, he did not do like what Bartók did. He did not go out into the field and record things. But of course that was not true. And Taruskin found a photo with Stravinsky with this little recorder, this kind of, it must be a wax cylinder recorder, like an early Edison recording device, recording peasants singing. And if we look at a piece like The Wedding, Les Noces, which followed the Histoire du Soldat, and we compare that with a traditional sort of peasant wedding ceremony, we see how they intersect in a very fascinating way. But even though Taruskin sort of mentioned that, well, you know, of course, you see, Stravinsky was just saying this, and we see that it's not true, and he did research, etc., etc. That's not what Stravinsky meant when he spoke about that. Bartók set out to actually catalog folk music, to actually, in a certain way, to preserve it. To this, Stravinsky wasn't interested in that. He was just interested in material. You see, that's like what I mentioned last time, that end of the film, when he said, "I love music, but more than music, I love to compose." He loved to gather material, and material came from different places. After this period that we're talking about now, material for him is what was called his neoclassical so-called phase, which was, I would not actually call neoclassical at all, but we'll leave it at that for the moment. In that phase, what Stravinsky did is he took music history and used that as his material. That he would sort of compose, put things together in this way. Okay, so this is the very beginning, and we saw last time about the first of these Stravinsky pieces, how he took the bassoon duet and compressed it into one and created the first piece. Okay, I will deal with that more in a moment, but I just want to play a couple things for you, not on the piano right now, but in recording. And this is simply, I'm doing this because after the Rite of Spring, as I mentioned, which was for a large orchestra, with remarkable orchestration, etc., he composed works which were smaller and smaller and smaller, until, of course, he came to solo piano work and the three pieces for a solo clarinet. And they were all, in a certain way, experiments in taking things which were, in a way, very popular, very normal, whether it was ragtime or it was the string quartet, or I should say folk music, Russian folk music, and sort of working with them and creating out of those very popular genres and forms something which was very new. So I'm going to play little bits of three pieces. Hopefully I can find them here. Okay. Hello. Okay. And we start with his three pieces for string quartet, which he wrote just after the Rite of Spring. Wait. I always forget. I'm so sorry. Let's try this again. Okay. And then I think I have to do this way. No, not sound. That's not what I want. Now I think this is going to work. Here we are. Just a bit of the first of the pieces. Uh-oh. Okay. That's the first of these three little pieces for string quartet. It's 1914. And here Stravinsky is taking this very, I should say, serious, very profound combination of instruments, and it's where composers have written, like, of course, Beethoven, etc., their most intricate and complex, profound works for this, and turned it completely upside down in this way. So it's very fascinating. I could play later work now, and unfortunately, I was never able to find recording here that I thought was particularly good. But this is Berceau's du Chat, in other words, the lullaby of the cat. That he wrote 1917, and they're just the first. And that is for 3 clarinets and contralto. couple of them. So here we see Stravinsky sort of refining the language of the Rite of Spring. You see, and we hear how it really comes from his study of folk music. What is it? And what he's doing here is he's listened to folk music without the trappings of traditional Western, I would say, bourgeois, perhaps, harmony. So it's sort of distilling that here. And that actually shows us, or I should say gives us information about his inspiration for the Rite of Spring itself. This way. But here he's sort of distilling the language down farther and farther. And as I will show, that ends actually in the second piece of the three pieces for clarinet, as he's sort of distilled until you get to that point. Okay, one more. And let me sort of clear this up here. This one down. And this is Stravinsky's piano rag music. I was hoping to actually play a excerpt from the Ragtime for 11 instruments, which he wrote before Histoire du Soldat, and before, of course, the three pieces. But I couldn't find what I felt was an acceptable performance. So what I did is I put up Stravinsky's own performance of the piano rag music, which he wrote just after the three pieces. So let's put them back to here. I played the whole of that because it's really a brilliant performance of Stravinsky, 1934. And the piece is so fascinating because you hear him taking elements from ragtime, elements from circus music, etc., and putting them together in a kind of collage, or sort of, you see. So this work I actually call cubist, in a way. The way Picasso, for instance, would take a face, and what he did often when he painted is he would cut out, let's say, the nose, and you'd cut out the ear, and this, and then put it here, put it there, put it there, to create something which was kind of a face, but totally new. Okay. So this is a great example of Stravinsky taking material, which is, and sort of constructing something which was very, very new. So it's out of popular material, material which is there, which everybody knew of, everybody had heard, etc., etc. Okay, so I think now we turn to the three pieces, finally. You see, it's almost, you may think, yes, you know, is that okay? There's always something, some issue in this little enterprise of ours. But everyone can hear me all right? That's okay? I'm so glad. You know, at least we get that more or less under control. So I go back to the first piece, and for people who are not here last week, I'll just show briefly what I was talking about. There, yes, I won't bother playing it even now, but I will just show it to you. This is the bassoon duet. Tell me how to get there. Okay. And as I mentioned, Stravinsky took that duet and compressed it into one voice. And here, show you. I think I organize everything incredibly well, and then I can't find anything. Yeah. I know, it's ridiculous. Here it is. I don't know why I did that. So, this is it's one of the pages of the way I took this and showed how the notes were compressed into that. And then I showed just the ending. Okay. Good. And here's the ending. This I have the clarinet part transposed so you can see it more easily, what it is, and how everything works together. With, as I mentioned before, the two notes which are different from here. And the one note is too early, but the other note is right here. That E, which is a concert C sharp, is not part of this, and that we can say in a certain way is one of his notes of genius. That is. So what he did not do was make just a literal copy of this, but in the couple places where it didn't fit the new idea of the clarinet with, he actually changed things that way. Okay, so that's enough of that. And I don't even go over it right now, which I did last week. And if anyone wants to really see this in detail, you can go back to the archive and take a look at last week's live stream. So then, let me keep doing this in some kind of organized fashion so I know what's happening. And then we take the first piece and we take a look at it, and this is actually what his manuscript looked like. And you'll notice that it's on two staves, it's a treble and bass clef here. And let me take this now, because I have it in more organized. Here we go. Fashion. This is the first piece as he wrote it. And you will notice how, you see this is bass clef, this is treble, bass, treble, bass clef again, treble. It keeps, and then this is all one, and then at the end, it ends up this way. Let's see. So the question is, is that, you're okay? See, I have my chopstick. So the question is, why, since he was writing for the clarinet, did he actually decide to write in this way, in treble and bass clef? I think one reason, which is obvious, of course, is that he did always write at the piano. And as he mentioned in a video done in the 1950s with Robert Kraft, which is actually quite interesting, he mentioned he was at the piano, how he had to feel the music on the piano. He felt it. So we have, as he's writing on the piano, so we have, and then right hand. And there's our that's our bassoon duet. And then it continues on more. Then and then bass clef or that way. So it's not simply that he wrote for the piano this way, but he had in mind a kind of polyphony anyway, a separation of voices, etc., which is in a certain way obvious when even when we play the clarinet, but it's very interesting to see it and to hear it, the way he broke it up in his original conception, which he wrote for the piano, of course. So, what we have here is something taken from the duet, and he keeps emphasizing in this that basic melody, but then he parses the rest out in a different way. So this piece actually has taken on a life of its own. So it's not simply the duet, but he looks at it here and finds, oh, interesting. So we all have this. That way. So we have an implied polyphony, or counterpoint, I should say, where we have this going up that way, in contrary motion. That you see. And these whole step progressions going up and down this way, I believe, then gave him inspiration for his next pieces, the second and third of them. And we see especially here, we have this going, and then the middle, you see. That way. So it's a kind of symmetry that he saw when he collapsed the piece this way. So again, this is taking a look at something, and in this case, it was his own work. That way. And seeing new possibility for that. Okay, I think I moved to the second work now. And this work is, I find extremely interesting. This, as I mentioned, I think is the most compressed and probably the final well, not attempt, but the final well, I should say the final piece in his sort of kind of Russian period, in a way. And the connection to the Rite of Spring, of course, through these works which transitioned to this last second work of the three pieces, is very clear. So you hear in what I played the Berceuse du Chat with the three clarinets and contralto. We hear that as something which easily can lead in a way to the second of the pieces. Okay, let me just show you quickly. This is his original. And you'll notice also that the middle is in both treble and bass clef once again. as we look at this piece, we see something which is in one sense very new, and I've found and I've read several different analyses of what is actually happening in this work. In fact, just the other day, I got in my email, I should say, an analysis that's sort of set theoretical analysis, a set theory. It sort of depressed me a bit, I would say. You see, I'm putting my foot in my mouth once again. Yes, I should have to lock my mouth up for this. But, yeah, I'm this way. Good. Yeah, I was not in the right focus, I guess. I have had a bad experience with set theory ever since I took a course when I was a student at Yale, and in that course, the teacher, it will be nameless, but he was very, very famous, was going through the variations, the Aldous Huxley variations. This is a later work. It's a 12-tone work. And there are two, in a certain way, fugues, sort of 12-bar fugues for the strings in this there's two variations. And he analyzed one and set theory. And then he analyzed the next one and set theory, and it was different, etc., this way. But what was very clear to me, just looking at it, and is actually clear when you listen, is that the second one is simply the inversion of the first. But of course, in that class, we didn't pay attention to that aspect of how Stravinsky actually composed it. So, I come back to this, and I don't talk about set theory at all. But what interests me is how did Stravinsky come about not simply writing the piece, but organizing it? Right. And by that, what do I mean? The actual melodic material we can actually grab very easily from the Rite of Spring and the subsequent works, as I mentioned. So, do I take a clarinet now, perhaps? What do you think? Maybe I should do that a little bit. The only thing is, I can't find my ligature. Ooh, this is quite bad. It should be here. Oh, there it is. Let me see. See, I put everything in the right place and then I forget. Okay. So we have that beginning, and that, of course, we can see from the Rite of Spring. And then also this part, that also easily comes from the Rite of Spring. We can a couple places where this almost can be a verbatim copy of what happened in the Rite of Spring. Okay, so it's not so much the actual melodic material that interests me, although that does interest me also, how he connects them, all the actual notes of the piece, but the overall form to begin with. And for that, we look at the work and we see, okay, it's very much kind of ABA form. Or you can say AB and then coda, perhaps. It's the when it goes back, it's really just a very compressed version of what happened in the beginning of this. But let's look at the overall pitch structure. Okay, and for that I'm going to do this in clarinet pitch for everybody, because it's, if you're having the music in front of you, it is much more what should I say? It's easier to look at. So, if you let me actually go here. Here, let's take this here now. And I go through this. Now we start, and it basically goes around a D, which is a concert B, but that leads, of course, to the G. And the G is, do we see something here? Is it, are we working, or is it okay? Yeah. Okay. What's that? Is it,
Can you stop?
oh, I can stop. Uh-huh. Can you still hear me? Can people hear me? That's important.
Hold it.
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah, this one is not good.
What's that? This is not...
Yeah.
What happened to it?
Microphone make a noise.
Oh.
Now it's fine.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, once again, you have the D there, then the D goes through that, and then leads to the G. And this basically goes to the, and remember that whole step progression from the first of the pieces this way. So the G has the F, G, F, G, F, G, F, that way. Okay, but that, so that, keep that in mind there, but go basically around G. Then again we go to the D to the G here, and again D, then going to the C. So then we have the D to the C, those two, and then goes back to the G. Now the second one, we have E, then he moves up to the F, back to the G, here, and then we end in G, 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 and then you have this little tag going back to E. Okay, let me take that. So let me see if I have something here. No, this is later. Okay. Anyway, so what is the relationship between D and G? Since basically we are in G, we can feel that as the tonic. Is everything okay here? Okay. And D, of course, is the dominant. Then it has a C, which is motivically important because it has to do with this whole step progression going up and down, so symmetrical progression. So he has the F, G, and then the D, C, that way. But the C can also be thought of as a subdominant, of course. So in this beginning part here, as we start Going D dominant to tonic. And then, of course, okay, that gives you that F there, but, and that melody is important, we should remember that. G, then the D again, to the G, then, and remember that melody too, of course, but going to the C, so we have D to the C, there, and then, which we can think of as going from G, or G major in a certain way, to C. Then he continues that C, and that's again a restatement of that melody. So, and then finally, he goes from his subdominant C back to G. So what we have in this beginning actually is a very elementary, I wouldn't even call it a taken from a work, which, I mean, you could think of it perhaps taken from a minuet, classical minuet, something of that sort, but even more elementary than that. It's simply, you have the dominant to a tonic to a subdominant to a tonic, this way. And this creates his overall structure of that. Then, of course, we move back to the end of the piece, and it was going, we have that F, going back here to our G, to the G, G again, and then, of course, going that little bit there. So the ending basically is also focused on G, the tonic. Now let's go to the middle part. Let's say you have very sort of traditional ABA form. For instance, let's say you have a minuet, classical minuet. The trio, which would be the B part, if it's in the minor key, would naturally be, or perhaps most often, whatever, it could be in the parallel minor, but in the relative minor. That's why the Mozart quintet, we also have things like that. But here, for instance, we're in G at the beginning. Now, if you're in G major, what is the relative minor of G major? E minor. So the middle part is E. Goes that, you see. So here he has taken this incredibly common form as an outline for something which is in actually incredibly new. And then you have that E again. And then that's this whole step motive, which runs through everything. And then this way, and then continues. Do you have a question? No? Okay. And then he goes up, he starts to go up back up from that E to the G. And he does that in a very simple way by going F to the back to the G. This way we can have a transition. And then he again reiterates that melody. And then I compressed the two things together, so it's funny. But he already puts that E in again, and this creates a parallel place with the first movement, where the end of the first movement after this is here. All of a sudden, I forget the context. So let me take a look. Just this is so funny that I remember the whole thing as a whole thing. Yeah, I'm sorry. So this is the end, and in this piece, in the first work, I had mentioned how he moves from. He starts from the concert E flat or our F sharp, and he moves down chromatically, and then finally gets to the C, which has to be an octave higher, or our E flat. But this chromatic work, he has its pedal going, but then he wants to go back up to that F sharp or concert E flat. I don't know if I'm making sense to people, but we have going from F, E, and then we go there's the E again, and then E, F. Oh God, what am I doing? That's funny. But then E again. F. As he moves back up to the E flat, and then basically finishes on his E flat or C. And of course that leads to the D or concert B, which goes to there. Okay, but going back over here, we have wait a second. Wow, this is really embarrassing. That's I only see this piece, but I can't see parts of it, so it's weird. But anyway, so here we have this F going to E, F going to E. You see, I confused the two movements. So anyways, we start. So again, F, E, like the first movement, you see. So this comes out of the first movement, and then he goes up to the G. And this stays on that, and then we have it here. That's all G, and then he has a little quotation from the middle part. Going to the E, this way. So we notice how he's taken this very classical form where you have the dominant tonic, relative minor, this way, and then the ending again going all the way through the tonic, and then just restating that relative minor at the very end of the piece as kind of remembrance of what happened in the middle, and created something very new, because we cannot say that this work is actually, I mean, for the clarinet, let's say, in G major or whatever. It's not at all. But he's taken these points, and that is how he was able to organize an overall structure. Okay, but now I'm going to do something more interesting. And the question is the actual notes of the piece. What to do. And one thing we find, which is, and I will do this, actually, I have to do this quite briefly in a certain way. Yeah. So, we have here you see, today is just nuts. It's totally crazy. Here we are.
Are you saying that every week?
I know I said it every week, but this is worse. For sure. Okay. Anyway, now what I'm doing, this again is all in clarinet pitch. Okay. And we have these little arrows here. And what I'm showing in this is we have, as each arrow is an addition of a new pitch. You see. So by time we finish, and I don't have the final G here this way, and this middle parts are here. By the time we finish this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then 11 and 12. These. So he's gone through, by the time he finishes here, he has finally gone through all 12 notes. Okay. Now, for those of you, you can see this again. Okay. For those of you who were here with me in one of the very early sessions, our live streams, where I was talking about Alban Berg and Elliott Carter and Milton Babbitt, and how to create a sense of closure, while in to say tonal music, that what you do is you move to the tonic. So it's a tonic chord that you have. But you can generalize that, and what we see that both Schoenberg and Berg, and especially in the Opus 5 4 pieces, the first piece as I went through in that particular live stream, and then we find it in later works. For instance, the way Elliott Carter finishes sections, structures his work, and I showed that in his very, in a certain way, simple but then not simple little piece for clarinet, Gras. How he completes they all, I should say, complete all 12 notes, and that creates kind of closure in the work. We find Stravinsky doing the same thing. This is 1918. Okay, actually it's after Berg wrote his 4 pieces, but I doubt that Stravinsky knew them, of course. But this is something that's just, I think, interesting, that was kind of in the air, and this, he's working with this, and we don't hear it that way, but you can find it. Okay. Then we go back here, and this is another fascinating little part here. If we can go here, you see all these notes. Of course, you have the D, then we have the G here, which continues, and there's a lot of G's here. And then finally at the end, he adds a G flat and a D flat. Okay, you see right there is D flat, right there, the G flat, and right there is D flat. And then he goes up to the G. Okay, but he didn't have that before. So that's at the very end. So now the question is, this is kind of interesting. Why did he leave those two notes for the end of this? And in order to see that, what is very obvious in this piece, and we see it in the last work also, of course, and it's kind of almost hidden way, but we do find it in the first piece as well, a kind of alternation between major and minor. This way. So we have and then you have that way. And you throughout you have, even here, this way, and this too. So this major, minor, and I don't want to spend the time exactly going through in the detail that I have. For those of you who read Japanese, I have there's an article that we did in Japanese magazine, Pipers it's called, where I do go through this in quite a great detail to show. My apologies that it's in Japanese. But what Stravinsky is seeing here, and you see this, that if we go up, that's major. That's minor. So, as we learned from Brahms, where you have the first movement of the E-flat sonata is an E-flat major scale, and the second movement is an E-flat minor scale, descending, that Brahms also was interested in the relationship, the inverse relationship of major and minor. And here Stravinsky is also that way. So that's why you have things like that happening. So you going down this way. Now, let's take C major here, okay? And in this, with C major going up, with 7 notes, and then here, from that, we add, from that, 7, 8, 9, 10. We add 3 notes, and we get, and then that, yeah. So going up, we get 10 notes. What 2 notes are missing? G flat and D flat. Of course, this is all a third, of course. I'm playing this whole thing. It's a third too high. That's anyway. But in clarinet pitch, those two notes are the ones which are not in the combination of the major and C major and C minor scale. So here Stravinsky is writing, and he's thinking about this. Oh yeah, this is going in here. And he has basically this kind of, and going up, and I will explain that a little more in a second. But to finish the word, this piece, he needed two more notes. And that's why at the end of the piece, toward the end, he inserts the G flat and then finally the D flat. And there you have a complete chromatic picture of this. Okay, we should go.
Don't stand there.
Sorry about that. It's all very funny. Yes. Someday we'll have a whole team of people working like they do in real things. Okay. So I'm showing you in a way that just the, 1 second, let me see, I had one more thing here. There was one more interesting little, yeah, it's here. So, we see how he's sort of been playing with this major minor and then seeing how he can fill out the chromatic space. And I should mention that you will find in the middle section also, by the time he finishes the first set, going to the F, he has actually again completed all 12 notes. And then by the end of the work, the F sharp at the end, remember that can also be a G flat, he completes, again, all 12 notes. Now, one more detail about this has to do with the beginning of this piece, and how did he actually get there, which is that way. And then, of course, is the same thing over again. And if we look at this here, I take this once again. We can put this here. Okay, this is our beginning, very magnified form. And then if we look at it, we see D here, okay, F, E flat here, C. So he's taken this here, which is our melody. Here, I'll take this back. Which is this. It's like, he starts perhaps with that as a melody, and thinks, oh, what can I do with that? And then he ends up that way. You see, so you jumble, you retake those on, but that's actually just an expression of that melody there. We have things here. Let me see. Yes.
Oh, say it.
Yeah.
You have to say it.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah. It says here, are there examples in 12 tone, this is 12 tone writing, where the arrival of the 12 carries the same sense of arrival as in tonal works? And yes, I think it is very much, very true about that. This, of course, is a subject not for now, but I dealt with it just very briefly. Although it's not 12-tone with the Berg pieces and how it completes this. And there's a wonderful book, the best book, like many of the best books, and this is the best book about Schoenberg, and it's simply called Schoenberg, and it's by Charles Rosen. And he points this out exactly in this way, how you fill out the chromatic space, and how Schoenberg did that, in fact. So that's it's a small book, but wonderfully written and full of fascinating insights, just like all of Charles Rosen's writing. Okay, so now again, I go now pretty much to the third piece, but before that, I just want to explain, why do I do this?
Oh.
Exactly. Because, you know, there's, again, theoretical, there's all these different ways of analyzing, etc. And what I like to do is to see what is good for a performer. Let me see. Because performers and composers, they're partners, and I've mentioned this before. And we should look at works like composers, and see how do we look at the structure. And as of course I went in earlier classes, I went in very great detail about how structure and emotion and expression are related, how structure in many ways creates that. Okay, so in this case, see, I'm looking at this piece, and not simply as a kind of academic exercise, saying, "Oh, look at Stravinsky. You know, he actually didn't do anything particularly unusual, because he took this very simple form, classical form, and just put some funny notes there." No, of course not. I'm saying, how do we look at this piece and see what it is, so that when we play it, we can make sense out of the piece. And I say that also because generally, when I've heard this work, you have one thing go diddle-a-doo, and then the next thing go diddle-a-doo, then the next thing go diddle-a-doo this way, and the piece is kind of a mess. I put my foot in my mouth again today. I'm doing that a lot. Yeah, see, I used to do yoga. I haven't for a long time, but maybe I should redo that, and then I can really put my foot in my mouth. Okay. Anyway, but if we see the direction of this, then we can actually play it in a way that is more directed. And that's the whole point of looking at this the way I'm looking at it. Let me see. And then this has to do also with rhythm, because Stravinsky is very precise with the rhythm, and yet when I usually hear, for instance, something like that. I mean, this is an exaggeration, but it's kind of that way. But this has nothing to do with what he wrote, except that basically the notes are there, right? But you have a real progression there. And actually, I have to make a digression right now myself here, because there are breath marks. And of course, in the beginning of the published version, it's written that all the breath marks should be strictly adhered to, and whatever. But the important thing, what is crucial to understand about Stravinsky, is that Stravinsky never meant that you take time for breath marks. You see, what happens, for instance, in the first movement, if you do that, that is going there. So, the whole work turns out to be in a kind of 3/4 time. While, in fact, the precision of his rhythm creates something which is wonderfully inventive and fascinating, because etc., etc. Okay, and what that does is create this kind of this, that, oh, that, this way, this way. And when I was a student, I was told that what Stravinsky had in mind, and of course, this is something that no one actually knew about, and we all use it. My teachers were using their imagination, I guess, to get this, was someone thinking over a problem. Is it this? Is it that? Is it this? Is it that? Right? And then coming to a conclusion at the end, which, of course, since he goes to the middle, it feels like, okay, we go down the middle road. And there's something to be said for that. I think it can give you a kind of an image of what's involved. But the sense of that way is wonderfully evocative in and of itself. And if you take the breaths and put extra time with that, you ruin it completely. Now the same thing, I go down to the second one. Here, the same thing happens in this one, where if you actually extend to where these breath marks are and just hold these notes any old length, again, you lose the actual harmonic motion, which moves from D to G, C to G, all this that way. And what do I want to say? Again, and the feeling of going from the first note, going all the way up to there. That's right. So, to the G. And then, of course, going that way. Yeah. I should wet my reed. And then, of course, it goes in to the E. See, there's only a 16th note and a 16th note rest. Not an 8th note and an 8th note rest the way I usually hear it. So again. he goes to the F. Now he's making transition back. Then now he starts to incorporate material, but goes back to the E and then the F. And then there is no fermata here. Fermata. And then that as it ends. And it's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. Okay. I go to the third piece now. Do I actually have time? Oh no, I can't believe it. Yeah, let's, okay, so that's the piece I really wanted to talk about. But of course I don't have time. But just, I want to go a little bit about that, about the problem of that work. And then I think, again, next week, I will start with this. And then I think what may be nice, because I've had many requests for this, is I'll talk about clarinet technique a bit, or I can call it the expressiveness of technique. Okay, now the first thing, and this is something I mentioned at the very end, is that in his original manuscript, the first two pieces are clearly in concert pitch. They're written a minor third below. That's why, as I come here, as you see here, the first piece, see if we can see that. As it starts here, you see here it's all minor third below what we play here. Ah! It's all in a day's work. Okay, then the second one is here. And we can just see from the beginning. You're going to see the mess on my desk as I try to do this. This is right. No, this is upside down. Yeah, that's a very interesting piece, being upside down. And we see from the beginning that's a B. And not a D, of course. And the whole thing, again, is a minor third too low.
Huh? Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, we go to the last piece. And I should also mention, you see, that he signs each of these. So this is, again, 6th to 19th of October, 1918. That's the first one. Okay. This is 11 to 24th of October, 1918. And then here is the last of the works, here. And this is the 2nd to the 15th of November, 1918. Okay. Now if we look at this one, here's the beginning. Notice, this is A flat to B flat. These are the notes that we play. But there's no notation that this should be for a clarinet in B flat. Okay. So, I think it is quite obvious that his original conception was in C. And I do this again. If we see how it begins, of course, on a concert E flat, he has that F sharp. That's our first tonic or pedal from the first piece. And then he keeps going down, and he ends on a C. Yeah. Now the second movement is a B, half step lower, and finally the last piece is B flat. So he's gone that way. So in a certain sense, as I mentioned, you can think of this as a plagal cadence. But as I was looking at this piece even more here, and the end of this piece, that you can even look at it as this way, as we're going from E flat, and then that way at the end. So it's like bye, going this with the that way. And of course we don't know its exact, and we can think of it either way, but I think that it is clear that his original conception was in C. Okay, now there are two more things that I have to point out now. And what time is it actually? Is it really, really very late, right? You see, I never have any sense of time.
Everybody knows that.
Here, I'm going to do this way. That we have in this part here, and I played I'm not going to play this well, maybe I do play it in C, but it starts out, of course, that way. That's, of course, in C, so this is a step higher. And then it goes back. And then what you have in his first manuscript, and in the second manuscript also, is this. He goes back to B flat. There. So the question is, what is right? Okay? And this is, actually this is very important now, because he writes this way. He has the A flat, and then this is in the Chester 1920 publication, he writes parentheses and a natural B. That way, and not a B flat. And the newer version of this piece posed by Chester went back to the B flat with that to play that way. But as I thought of it, and at the beginning when I saw that, I thought, oh, of course, that Stravinsky wrote this and wrote the B flat, and the B natural, of course, is wrong. And then I thought that to make a mistake, which is a natural with parentheses, is a mistake that takes too much thought. So it is not necessarily the case that the very first attempt at a composition is the correct one. Because composers can actually refine, change their minds, and any of you who have composed, I'm sure, know that extremely well. So, that's a kind of mystery, and part of the mystery had to do with the fact that the manuscript which Edmondo Allegro, who was the clarinetist who played the first performance of this piece, right, that manuscript was somehow, I thought, lost. It was not, Chester did not have it, and other things, and I couldn't find it. I didn't know what was, so I assumed it was lost. It turns out, and for this I have to thank a student of mine, Louis Arc, I should say, who's a French student of mine, a wonderful clarinetist, and very interesting and informed person who just in passing mentioned that the manuscript that Edmondo Allegra used and that he had, his manuscript, had been up for auction within France. So I didn't know about it, actually. And it was bought by somebody, and we don't know where it is now, and we're trying to find out. And if anybody knows, please let us know, because this is actually something that is very, very interesting and very important. Okay. Let's look at that. Now, what's done is that we have, as part of the catalog for the auction, when that manuscript was auctioned off. It was auctioned off within. It was an auction house in France, which I didn't know. I was not connected. It's not one of the Sotheby's or something like that. Here, this is it, and here. Let me get my chopstick again. Okay. It's right here. It's here. Right here. You see? Now here, Tati. Here we have it. Tati, Tati, Tati. There's. Do you see it? Can you see it?
No.
Where is it? It should be here. It's here, right there. Just
Where?
keep
Okay,
there. Just
yeah.
hold it there, and then here. You can put a little higher. Yeah. You see, this is the place. B natural, A, T, B. Okay? A flat, B. You see, it's clear that that is not a flat. You see? Understand?
Stopped.
Yeah. Okay?
Hold it.
Now,
Yeah, wait.
yeah.
It's not working.
You okay? Did people understand that?
Yeah, I think so.
What's that?
Somehow it's not working. Stop this. Continue, maybe.
Can we keep going?
Come on.
But did people actually understand? Wait.
Speak.
Okay, they did understand?
Yeah.
Okay,
Speak.
so that B natural is clear. And the fact that Chester, who should have known about this manuscript, had no idea about it, is actually a big indication of incompetence. I know, I put my foot in my mouth once again. Now, let's look at one more detail here, from here, and that has to do with the time signature. Now, there are two manuscripts of this, and both manuscripts have quarter note equaling 160. That's crazy fast. And here, also, in this one, if we can see, just the very beginning, again here is quarter note equals 160 in his. So that stayed that way. And then when it was published by Chester, it was made into eighth note equals 160. But the three manuscripts are quarter note equals it. And of course, I think that's an impossible tempo. But why is it there? And for that, I think we will just end now. And
Couple questions.
yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You see some. Which edition would be?
What is this?
Oh.
Uh-oh. Oh, none of this is where. This is... Yeah. Where is it? which edition to recommend to buy now. Unfortunately, all the editions, I know it's out of copyright, so it's possible to make a correct edition, but nothing has been made yet. But probably, even though there are mistakes, the old edition from Chester is probably the best one, I think. Better than the new one. Anyway, the question of the quarter note equaling 160, I think is fascinating, and for that, I think what we will do now. See, it takes so long to do anything, but is let me see here, and for here, I think we're going to do. This is Josephine Baker dancing the Charleston. This is one of them. Josephine Baker, of course, was an incredible personality, and she was the person who brought Sidney Bechet over after the Southern Syncopated Orchestra stint in England. She brought him over to Paris. So although this is really right after she writes, but the interest is here anyway. Now, can we? Wait. Here. Okay. And with that, there are a couple more mysteries with this last movement. And I think I will continue next week for this. Anyway, everyone, be well, be careful, and I hope to see you again next week. Take care. Thank you.